the touch of your lips, dear, but much more for the touch of your whips, dear. You can raise welts like nobody else as we dance to the masochism tango.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Hourgasm. This is the podcast where we talk about decolonizing sexuality and gender. I am Lynsey G, and I use the pronouns she, her, or they, them.
And I am Lenny Peppers. I use she, her pronouns.
So welcome back, everybody. I know that we left you on a cliffhanger last time because we said that we didn't know what we were going to be talking about next. But
you said you didn't know. I knew the entire time.
You are so sneaky.
Yeah, I totally didn't just pick something that I was already researching for class this week.
Of course not. We're way more rigorous than that. But we have finally landed on ageism. We want to talk about ageism. And first things first, I want to mention that some people might not know what ageism is. So we're going to have to come up with a definition that we're using here. But before we go into that, do we have a little disclaimer?
In this podcast, we use the heteronormative terms of gender binary of men and women under the understanding that there are agender, androgynous, bigender, pangender, and gender fluid norms that exist outside of cis normativity. While we tend to use male and female as shorthand, this is not meant to undermine the very serious role of colonization in violence against two-spirit and non-conforming individuals. Even more so, this is not meant to obscure the reality that two-spirit and non-conforming people are the most likely to experience sexual violence, as we have mentioned in earlier episodes. We do not believe in the gender binary, and I cannot say that loud enough. Without fluidity, which is a Euro-Western construct that forced a strict gender division on our societies, which itself is a form of violence.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I want to double back a little bit and talk a little bit about not believing in the gender binary. I don't know why it's been on my mind a little bit lately, just talking about gender identity and presentation and the binary nature of the way that we tend to think about it today. And this is a concept that we talk about on the show all the time, but the idea that we don't believe in the necessity or the objective reality of man versus woman being inherently separate and different things. And yet at the same time, obviously, in practice, in living in the world, they do exist as social constructs. So although these things that we don't support or really believe in as objective truths, although we denounce them, we live with them, we deal with them, and we're impacted by them every day. And I don't know. I'm not really going anywhere in particular with this little ramble. It's just something that's been... I think
that's absolutely important. Yeah. And that reminds me of something that I've been really, really thinking about as well lately, about how we talk a lot about the patriarchy.
Right.
And I don't want anyone to think that we hate all men or anything like that, because it's not true. Or I should say that we hate all cis white men.
Yeah.
My point is that we don't see patriarchy as that, but as a system that is constructed through colonization, not only of land, but also of mind and body and culture. Right. And so it's a thing that we talk about and that we're working on deconstructing in a way that makes people think about it a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
And so it's not. So I was thinking about that a little bit recently. And I was reading this book called Life Stages of Native Women by Kim Anderson.
Cool.
And they talk a lot about the book is basically like teachings and story medicine of like stages of life, and it starts with babies and then it works its way up into elders. And that got me thinking a lot about ageism in our society today and how differently we see old people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's a really good place to start, because basically, like, you just sort of defined the way that we're talking about the patriarchy here. You know, patriarchy, like you said, doesn't mean all men. It means this system that we have all been brought up in, that for the most part has been nameless through most of our experience. Like, you know, it's not like we grow up recognizing like, oh, that's a symptom of the patriarchy. Instead, it's just, this is how things are. You know, men are this way, women are that way, men do this, women do that. And it reaches into literally every facet of our lives.
Yes.
And in the same way, I feel like ageism is this almost unnamed, like rarely discussed, hugely prevalent reality that we live with, where, you know, older people are not seen as human beings almost. They're pushed to the margins in almost every way. And that looks wildly different for different groups of people. But, you know, I think that it is such a prevalent reality that we don't consider older people to be as valid as younger people, that it is almost like invisible to us that it exists. So we want to talk about ageism on this episode, first by defining it, which is, I didn't actually look up a Merriam-Webster definition this time, which I feel like I've been doing a lot lately, and I'm kicking myself for it. But, you know, ageism is basically the system that devalues older people's lives, and allows them, in my experience, I'm thinking of, you know, jokes and slights that I hear made regularly about older people, especially when it comes to like any mention of older people being like sexy or sexually active. If you mention that in almost any circle or on any TV show or anywhere, you almost always gets this like ew reaction, and it's funny, and we can all laugh about how funny that is together. And that is fucked up. Like, that is fundamentally fucked up that anybody's lived existence, and especially their sexual expression, would be the butt of a joke. And yet it is so commonly the butt of a joke that most of us just respond to any mention of it as a joke without even thinking about it. It's like our learned response. So that's only one way in which ageism shows itself, but it's something that I have been researching and thinking about.
Yeah. So I looked up like the World Health Organization's definition of sexuality for this topic. And it is the integration of somatic, emotional, intellectual, and social aspects of sexual being in ways that are positive, enriching, and that enhance personality, community, and love.
I like that.
So, yeah, it includes like notions of intimacy where there's like close association and familiarity and shared personal knowledge between the people who are experiencing it. And also suggests a degree of like caring.
Yeah, that's really nice.
The point was that there wasn't anything about age or gender or anything else.
Yeah.
Patriarchy or, you know, anything included in that definition.
Yeah, they're just talking about people.
Why? Yeah, right. And so why would we exclude anyone from sexuality?
Right. Yeah. That's a really good question. And also, like, good job, WHO. That makes me feel good.
So, but only recently I've noticed researchers are beginning to like note fluidity in sexuality, like over the course of the lifespan. In this book that I was reading this week, she talks about how like she was able to find a lot of ethnography about like women in their middle ages and adult women who haven't reached grandmotherhood or elderhood yet. And she couldn't find much about menopausal like ceremony or anything like that for the research that she was doing. And so I'm going to be 40 sometime in the future soon.
Someday.
And, someday I'm going to be, but I also have adult children. And so I was thinking about like how some societies, some tribal societies consider you an elder once you have had a grandchild. That really got me thinking about how not far in the future it is where I would be considered an elder and what that meant for me in terms of like sexuality and all the other things that go along with age. I actually kind of dove into this 2 years ago. I was writing a werewolf screenplay that I never finished.
Yet.
So like anyone, and there was like somebody who wanted a treatment for it. So if I ever do finish it, it may actually even get made.
Woo!
Called Menopause, PAWS, and it's a werewolf movie where a woman is going through the change, but the change isn't menopause, she's just turning into a werewolf.
Oh my god, yes. That's the opposite of what you usually see when people talk about, any kind of film about, somebody going through change and learning about superpowers. It's always puberty. Always.
Yeah. And this is like a horror film, and so she keeps going to like doctors, and the doctors are like, no, like they just keep like brushing it off as women's problems. And somebody could have caught that she was eating human beings or, things like that. Like this entire time she's been going to doctors and they've just like poo-pooed it as like menopause. And like the horror of like being a woman and not being taken seriously by your doctor and being somebody who doesn't know what's going on with your body and like having to figure that out and then learning that you're a monster. Okay.
Like really, actually.
Yeah, if you're actually, you have lycanthropy, which based on all of the horror films that I've seen over the years, I think is treatable.
Yeah, with a silver bullet. Zing! No, I was reading a little bit about that and thinking about that earlier too. That women, as a hugely diverse group unto themselves, are so often not taken seriously by the medical community. We're basically still treated as hysterical all the time. Oh, women report pain a lot more often than men, and that's because women have pain a lot, apparently. And we actually can handle a lot of pain, but often when we go to a doctor's office and we say, hey, I'm having a lot of pain, we get laughed out of the office, in one way or another. They think that we're making it up. They think that we're looking for drugs. They think that we're looking for attention. They think that we're being hysterical. And when you add to that experience that's experienced by most female identified people across their lives, the fact that as you age, you are taken even less seriously by the dominant culture and by the medical industry, the idea of going into a doctor's office as an older woman with a problem that you can't identify is terrifying unto itself. Like lycanthropy or no lycanthropy.
Yeah. It's so messed up because like the dominant idealized notion of like being young looking and physically attractive and sexually active is all like somehow combined when really those things don't have anything to do with each other. And what it does is it implies that there's a right or wrong way to age, or that there's an unsuccessful or successful way to age. And